Hi, welcome to Can We Have a Conversation? I'm your host, Reverend Stewart Pirelli. Historically and traditionally, the African American male has wanted to project the image of being strong, stoic, almost hyper-masculine male who eschewed mental health concerns and only saw position when absolutely critical. This behavior, of course, is masked that for some is hiding tremendous emotional pain and feelings of hopelessness and anger. The show attempts to unmask this stereotypical thinking. There's three crucial questions that we'd like to address on this show. One, what are the salient facts that relate to mental health and the African American male? Two, what are some of the reasons why African American males are not receiving the mental health services that seem to be needed based on incidence and prevalence of mental health disorders that African American males experience? And three, what can we do about the concerns raised on this show? Our topic today is master manipulation. We have 5 guests on our show, and I would like to introduce them from left to right. To my left is Professor Dr. McLean. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
Good to be here. And then we have Tyson Amir.
Yes, sir. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Glad you're here. Mark Barbosa.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate being here too.
And we have Brandon Stewart
Yes, thank you.
and Devin Jones. Welcome to the show.
It's me.
So I want to just ask a question. How many of you witnessed a dead body before you were 10?
How you want us to answer? By show of hands?
You can just answer however you feel.
Yeah, so first dead body I saw, I was a little over the age of 10, I was 11.
Okay.
A good friend of mine. It's a traumatic experience. You know, changed my whole everything. And you don't really recover from that, but at the same time, no, you have to move forward. You got to figure out how you want to press on. But I remember that vividly, and I always felt like that was a moment where my childhood ended, you know, and I moved into adulthood even though I'm 10, 11 years old.
How did that make you feel?
And it was tragic, for real. Like, I remember, so my friend's name was Francisco. We called him Pancho, right? And the way that he ended up dying, his parents went away, and they had a whole bunch of liquor in the house. And so they gone, he drinking, he ends up getting drunk, and then he falls unconscious because his body can't hold all that alcohol. And then while he was unconscious, he vomits, and then he suffocates in his vomit. I've said it a couple of times, it's tragic. And like seeing that and then knowing the circumstances that created his death, and then dealing with the reality that this dude that I was just playing with a couple hours ago is dead. And then the aftermath of that, like going to the wake and the funeral, I wasn't ready for that. So I'm a kid, but dealing with one of the most real aspects of life, which is death, you know, and having to figure out how to deal with that, and then how to figure out how to deal with not being able to like have that relationship with a friend anymore. He gone forever.
Right.
And then as a community, all of our friends, we trying to figure out how to move on. And then we talk about the idea of master manipulation. I don't know if we're gonna get into that, but like drugs and alcohol, those things being tools of the oppressor or the person that is trying to pull the strings to manipulate us as a people, and then seeing a friend of mine fall casualty to those vices, you know? It's a lot.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you sharing.
Y'all was the same age?
Yeah.
So what about you?
Well,
10, 15?
me, I was 15 when I first seen the dead body. I'm talking about Chris. He was there. We was together that night. But Yeah, we was on New Year's Eve. We was in the house, you know, chilling, and then we heard gunshots, and then we came outside, and we had looked across the street, and our friend, Chris, was his last name? Yeah, Chris Jones. He was on the porch. He had got shot, and yeah, it was like he was just laid out on the porch. Like he had dreads, so like when he got hit, some of his dreads was like spread out from his head. It wasn't cool. I didn't like it.
How did you respond? I mean, how did it affect your life?
I don't know. I was just quiet for a while. I don't know, cause I haven't ever been through that or experienced anything like that, so I didn't know how to deal with it. So, I talked to people like my friends and I know, you know, to get the comfort, like people that know him too. That's how I dealt with it, but I still think about it time to time on New Year's Eve. It happened on New Year's Eve, so like almost every New Year's Eve I almost think of it. So I gotta deal with that. But I was 15.
And I was 13 around that's the time I was gonna bring up too.
Okay, 13. So explain your situation, your experience.
Well, we pretty much experienced. It was the same day, same incident. It was just kind of hit me like it was new to me, like kind of not new, but like it started hitting me, and I start waking up like and noticing that death is real.
Definitely.
At 11, walking in the house. That's when I used to stay 96. See my uncle. We were just talking and stuff. And then once I go in the house, I just hear all these gunshots. Come back outside on 96 and B Street. I don't know. I'm making something up. I ain't gonna lie. I ain't never seen no dead body.
Okay.
Here.
You know,
But let me add another thing to that thing. So, just recently, I'm a little older than the gentleman here, but
Can't do this.
the fact that, like, we've all had that communal experience, but I had another experience recently which, I mean, shocked me again. So, I'm a teacher, right? And I saw, through social media, one of my students killed by police recently. His name was Mario Woods. And so, as you were talking about the New Year's date, with the young man, Chris was his name?
Yes.
And so Mario was killed December 2nd. So I don't know exactly when this program is gonna air, but we around that time. And so he was in the streets, Bayview, Hunters Point, San Francisco. Call comes out, police come on the scene. They say he has a knife. Their narrative, and you know, the police, they gonna say all the things that they gonna say. They say that he made a threatening gesture towards these officers. He had about 9 officers completely surrounding him, people with their cell phone cameras out, so they recording the whole incident. Like, I knew this dude, you know what I'm saying? Like, I hadn't seen him in a couple years because he left my class and he had to go to prison for a while, but then he came back home, right? And so, guns drawn, he's trying to walk away from the thing. They fired 40 plus shots at this brother. So I saw a human being that I know and knew extremely well and was rooting for to do something different, gunned down, cold blood by police. That's a whole nother experience, you know, like to witness that, to see that person, to see the last couple seconds of their life, see their blood all on the street. And then, I don't know what happened with the young man that you're talking about, but like, there's been no justice whatsoever. So that's another aspect of it. Like when you see what happens and then you experience that, but then you can't do anything about that because the system is like, nah, he dead, and we glad that he's dead. We sanction his death.
that's, you know, that's the whole conversation where we say the topic is master manipulation, because it's to silence you, to put the fear in you, to manipulate you to have fear for your life. And it started with the mentality of the slave mentality where the woman was married to the husband, and the husband is seeing the master rape his wife, and he can't do anything about it. He is completely silent, because if he says anything or do anything, then he's gonna get killed. Or his daughter is being raped. And then it gets even to the point where you get pulled over by the police. You can't even really tell your story because you're silenced, because you don't know if they're gonna take you to jail or they're gonna take you around the corner and kill you. And so this is some of the things that I'm a military man. I grew up in East Oakland, but I'm a former Marine where they talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. But I remember writing a paper about this because even though that was a term for military, this is something that you all are dealing with in the city of wherever you came from, or just experiencing this kind of trauma. And so I wanted, you to talk a little bit about that.
Certainly, Reverend Trivia. Unfortunately, what these young brothers are experiencing is unfortunately very typical. The reason, the greatest cause of death in the African American male community for young brothers 15 to 24 years of age is either homicide, some type of quote-unquote accident, and suicide. And the fact that this is occurring is totally devastating. But as Reverend Trivia had pointed out, the devastation is not just that this is occurring, but it's also the trauma it causes for you that is pervasive. The post-traumatic stress disorder doesn't stop when the incident stops. It doesn't stop a couple of months after the incident stops. But it's there, as you pointed out. You continue to experience the death of your friend who died many years ago when he was 11 years of age. So that effect of the trauma has not only effects in terms of how you experience your day-to-day existence, but it also affects your physiology. Believe it or not, every time you experience that little bit of stress, or that significant stress, there are chemicals that are actually produced in your body, one of which is called cortisol. And that chemical actually impacts your blood pressure, and impacts your kidney function, and impacts so many other facets of your life, of your physiology. And that's really one of the reasons why also that African American men have the greatest number of medical problems of any other race and die sooner. So we're talking about an incident that occurs when you're 11 years of age, but those incidents stay with you and they impact things further and further down the road and stay with you for a lifetime. So the importance of talking in situations like this is to give you an opportunity to really talk about that. Many of you may not have had the opportunity to sit down and talk about your feelings and an expression of the feelings that you experience when that death occurred. Some of that, talking about it, getting some ways of dealing with it, could dampen the impact of it on a long-term basis. So one of the reasons for conversations like this is really to begin to give you skills in terms of how can you deal with these types of stressors. The stressors may not leave right away in our communities, but the impact of those stressors on your day-to-day lives can be dampened or mitigated.
Growing up in East Oakland, when I was young, I had a real good friend of mine that was killed by the police. And he was a lot older than me. He was like a big brother to me. But they actually beat him to death with a stick, a club. And I didn't know the effect that it had on me. So I joined the service to get out of East Oakland because it was a hot time. I just needed to bounce. And so I left, and I was stationed in Virginia. And coming out of a club one night, I see the young lady, and I approached her, began to start speaking to her. And then I had a guy tell me, he said, "Hey, nigga, that's my wife or my girlfriend." I can't remember. And I said, "Man, I didn't know." I said, "You're here, and she's way back here." And he began to walk up on me. Well, we grew up East Oakland. That's not going to happen. So one was a counterpunch, and the other one was to try to take his head off. Before I knew it, there were stroll patrols. These are police from the Navy, all surrounding me. And all I could see them doing was drawing their clubs. So now I done went into a survival mode, because all I can see is my friend that got killed by the police. So what I do is I'm throwing everybody who comes close to me out of the way, and then I take off. Now, mind you, I'm working for the commanding general of FMF land. That means the general was a 2-star and a 3-star general that ran the whole East Coast. I'm working for him. I'm working for the chief of staff and the staff secretary. They locked me up that night. I went to jail. They put me in jail that night. The next day, I got out. And the staff secretary asked me, what happened? And I began to explain my story. And he said, I understand all of that, but why did you run? I said, sir, with all due respect, I said, where I come from, if they're going to pull out clubs, it's best for me to run than kill them. And he let me off. But that was my mindset because of my experience. And I responded out of my experience, not even thinking about the consequences. Just went right into the survival mode.
What you know.
It's what you know. And so a lot of this, what we've been talking about, you guys have been holding on to. Have you guys discussed this since then? And have you got any help about this situation? Or did you just try to cope with it on your own?
Well, I'm curious for the brothers here, Mark and Brandon, right? I mean, y'all witnessed the same thing at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Like, what y'all do with that? Like, how have y'all been able to deal with that?
We used to talk about it when it first happened. Like we used to talk about it, and then like after a while, I don't want to say it like that, but it's something that we accepted, even though we you know what I'm saying?
Put it at peace, like
Yeah.
in God's hands, like.
It was just, there's nothing we can do about it no more. You feel me? We still remember who he is and all the memories we have, but that's all we can keep.
Right.
There's nothing else, you know? Because if we keep holding on to it, it's going to keep bringing us down.
You know, the devastating thing about witnessing something like that is the first time is culture shock. You know, you're like, wow, you know, I can't believe that happened. But then when you start seeing it so much, it begins to be a part of life.
Yeah.
It's not even that devastating. It's like you get immune to that. I don't know about you all, but you see so many, so it's just
You get
another
used to
life.
it.
Yeah, you
Like,
get
no,
used to it.
Like really, like I
You
got
know.
used to people dying around me.
So how, I mean, you know, coming out of the environment like that, how does that deal with who you are today as far as, how do you deal with those? I mean, do you feel like your life is next?
I feel like what don't kill you make you stronger, and if you keep moving, you just learn from it. Everything makes you stronger if you're not dying from it.
That's true. That's true. Because you get strong, you know, life is a classroom. Did you know that? Every day there's a lesson to be learned.
Yeah.
So,
If you go through the day without learning nothing new, oh, hey.
so you just
What you
wasted
doing,
the
watching
day.
TV?
So with that said, another subject I want to talk about is, have you ever experienced domestic violence in your home? As a child,
Like what kind?
any
You
kind.
know, we all fight our brothers and sisters.
No, I'm talking about domestic violence where
Like a man hitting the mom?
your mom,
I don't-
abusing you.
I ain't had that. I didn't have that. I didn't go through that.
Like when I was younger, I could say around like probably like 9. I had like my little sister was like my mother was pregnant with my little sister. Her and her dad, like my mother and my little sister father, got into it. I guess like me being young, I still remember it. Like I remember seeing them arguing and like shoving each other, like pushing on each other. So it was like pretty like a domestic violence.
How did that affect you?
Well, it kind of made, I had anger problems a lot. So that kind of made me think like, ever since then, like all my life growing up, I started thinking like, oh, I never let nobody touch my mom. And I don't play that. Like my guard goes up to things like that. Like I couldn't do nothing then because I was younger, but it hurt me now. Like I feel like I could have and should have did something about it. So now it's like, that's where I'm at with it.
Now, can I say something?
Yeah.
See, now, like, if you wouldn't have went through that with your mom, it's probably a chance that you wouldn't you'll let more stuff slide, like with people doing stuff to her. So it's a good thing that some things that we go through, even though it's messed up, it's a good thing as long as you learn from it, though.
It's one of the life lessons.
It's not a good lesson, but or how you learn it, but as long as you can receive it and accept it, or you know, I mean, break it down, understand it.
The question is, what is the lesson that's learned from that?
You learn from people's mistakes.
Okay.
Well, that's the hope. I mean, like, we witness so many different things, and we've been talking mainly about murder or death and people around us that we care about dying. Now we're talking a little bit about domestic violence. Like, there's so much violence around us, whether it's perpetrated or it happens in the home or it's happening in the street. And then if we want to talk about just our greater society, like the bigger picture, the society that we live in, and we talk about the master manipulation, like we live in a society that has practiced state-sanctioned or state-sponsored violence against black people and other oppressed communities since the day that we've been here. And so we internalize violence. And then like, yesterday was Veterans Day. And not to diminish or to make light of anybody, we have a culture that celebrates people that we've sent off to war, and oftentimes we sent them off to war to fight these battles to get the 1% or rich, wealthy white people more money, you know what I'm saying? And we exploit their countries, we taking their oil, we taking the poppy seeds from the folks in Afghanistan to make these cheap pharmaceuticals and all that. And so we celebrate this culture of violence, and then the police is in our neighborhood doing violence, or they locking us up, taking us away from our homes, from our families. And so constantly surrounded by violence on all these different levels, and we internalize that. And we as black people have been the primary recipients, aside from like Native Americans, you know what I'm saying, of that state-sponsored, sanctioned violence. And then it begins to manifest in different ways in our homes and the way that we carry ourselves. And we have to have a place to deal with that. We don't, because we're so busy just trying to survive.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
That's right.
I've used my experience a little bit, and I talked about Mario Woods. Man, in the past 18 months, bro, I've known 3 people killed by police. You know what I'm saying? Like a woman by the name of Jessica Williams, they shot her in the head. A brother by the name of Alvin Haynes, they choked him out at County Jail 5, San Bruno. Choked the brother out. Another cat I know, they beat him so bad he can't even use his hands no more. And that's just we talking about what the police doing, and that's not even saying what's happening in the streets, because we out here trying to survive, trying to get money, trying to take care of our families, so we taking all these different types of chances. But it's crazy. And then what do we do with that? Where do we go with that? For me, I try to write, and that's a way that I try to process that experience, to do something constructive with it, and then to turn it into stories that we can have conversations with. But like, it's around us all the time, every day, everywhere.
Let me ask you a question. Did you want to say
No, I was interested in some of your writings.
That's what I was going to
Yeah.
ask. Could you, based on what we're talking about
No doubt.
right now, what would come to your mind of a piece that you wrote?
Well, a piece that I did that incorporates a lot of this, especially like the domestic violence piece. I talked about my young brother who died because of alcohol, and some suicide stuff. I have a piece that's about 3-4 minutes long. If you don't mind me sharing it, I'll share it. It's called Family Tree. It's a story that represents an experience in my family.
Say it loud, because.
All right, so it goes, this is the story of my grandfather. You see, when my mom was still a toddler, her mother married a man named John Oliver. And like many black men, he worked in the armed services, hard to determine what made him nourish his habit of alcohol, which made him an addict, the travesty of alcohol dependency, which led to a tendency for a beast to surface. He would eventually begin to beat, kick, choke, fight, cuss, whip, inflict pain. A young black man, intelligent and handsome, but destined to reclaim the anthems of souls destroyed by those liquid phantoms. He consumed demons and spirits with stickers and labels, liquor in tinted glass containers, became a stranger to himself. It changed his mentality, became hellish, a drunken zealot without any inhibition. His mission, to satisfy his selfish desires. He struggled with his sobriety, even denying that he had a problem. And when off the liquor sober, he was one of the nicest men that you could ever meet. He was kind, generous, considerate. But you see, those times were few and far in between. He developed a routine on Fridays to be gone for a few days, return home early Sundays. The booze he paid for stayed on his breath, and the bruises he made became sore and stayed on her flesh. As he led his family through the church doors and played the role of the righteous father, pious, when he really had a dark side of a pirate, a tyrant. I call him a domestic terrorist. All that violence and abuse sanctioned under the guidelines of legal marriages. My grandma sought counseling. She went down to the local parish, and the church father told her like this, to simply grin and bear it, as if God wanted her to be a punching bag for this man through sickness and health until death do you part. But she stayed strong, knowing something was way wrong, and kept praying to God for help, because this man couldn't control himself. Her mental health and life on the line, and at times when intoxicated, you could see the devil in his eyes. My aunt, uncles, and mom would huddle and cry, hearing muffled blows on my grandma's flesh, not knowing if she'd be alive at the time of sunrise. His iniquities then spread to his seeds. You see, my aunt and two uncles began to emulate his deeds. They started out with the drinking and smoking, but two of them didn't let it control them. They conquered the monster, but the addiction was so much stronger. And my Uncle Johnny, he named after his father. He took after his father. He sought something to curb his addiction. He started experimenting, injected heroin into his system through his forearm. One shot was all that it took. Hook, line, and sinker. He destined from the womb to be a casualty of this chemical warfare. The family noticed he drastically changed. His parents already gone their separate way. You see, my grandma, she finally got the divorce. John Oliver singing, he out of Mississippi. He tipsy, of course. Little Johnny was fidgeting. He wasn't into as much physical activity as he used to be. And what could it be when the family would ask? Nothing is what he would snap back, but it became all apparent when he forged his mom's signature to get cash that he had smack tracks on the other side of his elbow. He got into a rehab and started getting back to the Johnny we used to know, but then them chemicals began to call him back by way of this one fast sister he used to holler at. See, she slipped him a bag of smack. It wasn't cut clean. Set to wreak havoc in his recovering bloodstream, but still he cooked it. He drew it up slow into the syringe, tied his arm off tight, pushed that needle through his skin. My poor Uncle Johnny, he chasing that dragon again, and that evening, this is what happened to him. You see, he shot up. He dropped to his knees. His muscles seized up. His heart gave up. He never got up. He a byproduct of his father's disease. And by now, under his skin, his blood starts to chill. In sets the rigor mortis. My uncle, he a picture, a ghetto steel portrait titled Overdose in Mom's Kitchen. My grandma, she come home tired from work, not knowing his condition, not knowing that a worst nightmare has just come to fruition. It's dark inside the home. The light switch is on the other side of the room. She feels an emptiness in the womb as she passes a cold stump. She calls out for Johnny. There's no answer. He's not responding. She turns the light on and sees her son's body hunched over with his life gone. And that night, my mom felt the same pain so many miles away. About a year later, I joined the family, and I'm the first after Johnny. And somehow, because of this madness, I know our bodies are oddly connected. John Oliver Sr. still just as reckless. He's still drinking, still changing from a man into a demon, still scheming on women. But one evening, it all began to catch up. It's paid back for all them times and all them lives that he done messed up. And for real, it's hard to feel any remorse or sadness. I still don't know all the details, but a woman who grew tired of his madness, she took him off this planet for good. And should I feel this way truthfully? I don't even know. All I know is that this is a true tale, some of that ghetto nonfiction of what happened to my family, and all because of addiction. Addiction, y'all. This is my family tree.
That was good.
Very powerful. Very powerful. You know, how old are you?
I'm in my 30s. I made it to my third decade safely.
Amen.
Yeah.
And God has so much for you, brother.
And so much for all of us, though.
That's right.
Yes.
Yes. And what would you say? Because that's a story. I'm not minimizing your story, but that's the story of most urban communities. Yes. All over this country. Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, D.C., Atlanta. Everybody got a story. Look at her face, you got a story. Everybody got a story. How do we overcome that?
That's a big challenge. Like if
Where do we start?
yeah, where do we start? I think we start at multiple levels. We start at the level of people's telling the story, first of all, because that story provides information to potentially millions of other people in terms of what can happen. And so the next step is after you sort of get the word out that this can happen, then you look at what are the alternatives to that. What can you do about that? And that's a big challenge because what we're talking about is addiction, we're talking about domestic violence, we talk about violence, period, and we're not going to have simple solutions to any of those. But what we want to start with is at least having a place where we can talk about those issues and identify the problems at a one-on-one level. And then there are issues that would take those problems to a more global level that may look at what are we doing in terms of our mental health services in this country. What can we be doing differently? What do we need to do in terms of providing more available mental health professionals to assist families? One of the challenges and one of the reasons why so many African American men do not seek mental health services, such as your Uncle Johnny, is that there aren't a lot of African American mental health professionals, particularly men. So the idea of going in and telling someone else about your business, the stigma associated with having those feelings, having those fears, having that depression, which is sometimes the reason for the addiction, is something that we tend not to do because we don't want to tell someone about it, particularly someone that doesn't look like us or act like us. So there's the avenue that we need to go down in terms of preparing more people of color to be there for those mental health services. The other issue that sort of arises in terms of the addiction and the violence is trying to help people identify different ways of dealing with those complex situations. In terms of what is the alternative to beating someone if you're having an argument? What is the alternative to slapping your spouse around? How do you take that 5-minute break from that argument and just settle yourself down so it doesn't happen? Those types of experiences as well. So there are a number of things we need to be doing, but the first step is just getting the word out, getting those stories out.
And I see that's what you do. And does that bring you freedom? Does it release you from the bondage, or, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to know what the brothers thought about it too. But like for me personally, so the way that I wrote it, I didn't witness that. Mm-hmm. But because of like all the stuff that we're talking about, the pain, the trauma, the hurt, the generational like brokenness that happened as a result of that, like that story was so heavy in my family. I heard that every year of my life. You know what I'm saying? We getting ready to approach Thanksgiving. You know what I'm saying? My uncle, he a picture on the wall. Like we go into my grandma's house, the same house where he died in the kitchen. Like we all know exactly where he was at.
You ever
and
get
so,
chills when you're in
yeah,
there?
bro. I mean, that joint, like especially, like I'm saying, like when you walk in,
You get cold chills?
not necessarily cold chills, but like I always have an experience when I'm in there, no doubt, because I gotta like walk all the way across the kitchen to get to the light switch, and that's where his body was at. So like when I turn on the light, I'm basically standing in the spot where he died. And the sad part about that is he died in the same house where the stuff that we were just talking about, because we was just on the domestic violence, tangent. Like he saw his mama getting beat by his father. And so, I mean, you talked about your experience and you became like real protective of your mother, but then also like quick to, jump on somebody at the same time. And so like for my uncle, my understanding is like he witnessed that. He definitely wanted to protect his mother. He loved his father. So like, what do you do when the person that you care about, you named after, is like one of the biggest villains in your household? You want to protect your mom. Like, what do you do with that? He tried to cope with all of that stuff going on in him by, shooting up. And then that eventually killed him. So the the problems that played out in his father's personality impacted the family so much that everybody was affected. And then my uncle was affected to the point where he overdoses, abusing himself. I mean, it's heavy. But I told the story because my family needed to process that. I needed to process that. Like I talked about my homeboy from way back in the day. I've written about him because that's how I processed that. And then I try to turn it into something where it can form a conversation. Like I can do something with that. Like you said, I mean, millions of us, so many of us had that experience in our family. But we can talk about it and try to do something with it to move in a different direction.
What did you guys hear from what he said? How did it impact you? Or what did it make you think about?
In my opinion, it was very strong. It was like, you was specific of not what you heard and not just how everybody else felt from like what you got from it. That's what I noticed, and it was just like I could relate to it, just off of the pain. And a lot of people in my family grow up like a lot of drugs, be off a lot of different drugs. I got, excuse me, I got a lot of family off. I got a lot of family I see that be off one drug to another, a hard drug, and then it's a lot of people that I know that are not off drugs, and then I see the difference, see the big difference in what drugs could do to people, and what it could do to their mind, mentally, physically. And I just see that sometimes. I don't want to say like everything that happens to everybody else affects me, but a lot of it do hit me sometimes when I sit back and think about what is happening to other people that I see, not just happening to me.
What I can relate to is like the addiction. Like my mother, I'm not sure if my father was, but I know my mother was a drug addict. No, my father did drugs too though, but my mother was a drug addict for 28 years. She did heroin. And so yeah, I'm the baby, so I really wasn't there to see it like that. But when she talks to me about it though, and from watching like movies and documentaries of other people and like just like like documentary where you watch stuff and they do drugs and tell you about it and stuff. You feel me? And I just put two and two together, and sometimes I'll be like, I picture like, oh, that's like, you feel me? That's what my mom used to do. And then I don't know, but when you start talking about the addiction, that's what I start thinking about.
I can relate to it too, because my auntie, she ain't died from addiction though. She died from breast cancer recently. But she did a lot of drugs, like a lot of them. And I could just relate to that.
One of the things that we know that happens with addiction is that it's typically covering up something else. It's covering up pain that's related to something else that's going on in people's lives. Oftentimes it's feelings of depression or fear or anger, and the drug is really a way of anesthetizing yourself, sort of putting you in a situation where you don't feel. What do you think about that idea?
Basically, like, I see like some people when they get mad, they be like, "Oh, I'm finna go smoke," and it's like drugs, and some people would be like a gateway. Well, kind of like drugs kind of keep your mind off things. Like, oh yeah, in some people's opinion, like, oh, I can go get high and that'll solve all my problems. All my time.
Do you gotta get high again?
Yeah, because the high goes down.
Yeah.
Right. And then when it goes down, what happens?
I want to smoke
Everything you
weed.
try to get rid of come right back.
So what does that mean then, if it's going to come right back?
Basically, it's gonna be there always, if you're high or not high.
You just gotta find another way
To cope with it.
Yeah. Yes.
What do you guys use to cope? How do you cope with the anger you feel?
Sometimes I feel like I cope with things by writing lyrics and and just listening to music. Music helped me cope with a lot.
I do drugs. I'm not gonna lie.
That's good for being honest. What are other options that you might consider?
I have people I do talk to. Like I could that I can have a conversation with about. Like if I'm really mad about something and I feel like I could get off my chest, I got people I can call and reach out to. But sometimes I don't choose that way though. That's the issue.
Thank you for being honest.
You're welcome.
Let me ask you a question. Do you feel it's okay to cry?
Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. I didn't have so much hurt and pain in my life. I ain't gonna lie. I be watching a movie and they get sentimental. Sometimes I start tearing up because I be feeling where they come from. Like if I see somebody, like if I'm watching a movie or if I see somebody going through something, like for instance, I was watching the movie. I forgot what movie was it. But you know what I mean. Like when the movie get emotional, I get emotional because I could relate with what they going through, and it's like, dang.
In my opinion, I feel like it's a stress reliever to cry. Like sometimes I be wishing I could cry. Like when certain things happen. Like crying be so easy to relieve stress, and a lot of people can't cry. Like after a while, it's hard to cry. Like some people be wishing they could.
Is it? That's what makes me think though. Like, is it the fact that we can't cry, or are we used to it?
Right. I
feel
think
like-
it's a combination of both. And I remember.
Cause before you say that, like for instance, right now, I'm pretty sure when we was young, you take us to a haunted house, we finna cry and be scared. But now, since we used to it, we used to haunted houses and what they do. It's nothing now. We like, bruh,
Certain things.
we're used to it, so it don't bother us how it used to when it first started happening.
One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and maybe you can expound on this, the fact that it seems like African American young men are the only young men that go from childhood to adulthood without the adolescent age. It's like we're forced to go from a child to a man. And I had to ask myself the question one day because my heart was so hard. And as much as I loved my mother, I had to really ask myself, if my mother died today, would I cry?
Every time I think about that, I kind of feel too. I do be thinking about that, cause it be crazy out here. Like they just be dying left and right, like drop fly. Like I just be thinking like, yeah. I just be thinking like anybody, like of anybody, like anybody that I love and care about, like somebody like what I really like. Yeah, I would.
Something happened to I lost my dad when I was 10, so my mom is all I really got. I got sisters and brothers too, but you know, as a parent, that's all I really got. So if I lost my parent, yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be very hard. It will be very hard.
The reason I raised the question is because of what you said. You get to a place where life challenges you to a place where you get immune to the challenge. And so now it begins to be a way of life, and you're so hard, your heart is so hard to the point that no matter what happens, it doesn't matter.
You feel like you have to protect yourself so you don't cry. You feel like you have to be, you have to man up, and you feel that you can let other people know that you're weak. If you cry.
In my opinion, I look at it like it's not really like a man thing, like not to cry.
No.
Like I feel like that. I kind of look at it like that kind of be like artificial manhood. Like the real thing, I feel like everyone should be able to cry without it being a problem. But it's like after you get, say like a dog get in trouble all the time, you're gonna get used to getting in trouble. Like after so many things, once you learn how to swim, you're not gonna be scared to be in the water. So I look at it like after so many things of like the death that a lot of people experience a lot of death. Well, a lot of us have experienced a lot of death coming from East Oakland, and it's like the death. You don't really not feel bad for it, or you don't feel some type of emotion, but it's like after a while, like I feel like after me losing a handful of people, I start not being able to cry, and I used to be mad at myself, like why am I not crying? Like, do I really care? Or is it something like keeping me? Like, do I care or do I, like crying, I thought you cared. And after a while, I start getting older and start seeing like, I care, but why am I not crying? And that used to confuse me a lot.
The one concern I would have is if you are not crying and you feel the need to cry, what is that happening to the other parts of your body? What is that? What's going on? How are you sort of pushing it down? Is it going to show up someplace else? Like anger.
Yeah, okay.
So if you go somewhere, please.
If it don't come out like in you crying, it start coming out.
It's gonna come out a different way. Like it's either you could do it physical,
Right.
or
Either
emotion,
like-
or
like
like
sad.
mentally.
Either come out in different type of feelings.
Instead of coming out your mouth.
Like either crying, it can come out sadness, or it can come out anger, or you could be too happy. It can come out happy. Different emotions. You
Yeah.
start messing with the emotions.
Right. Or you start striking out at other people. Or
No, he was saying like.
the notion, the funny cartoon of the guy who comes home from work after a bad day and sort of kicks the dog. It's that sort of notion. It's going to come out.
Yeah, some
with
way.
the emotional
Like if
experience.
if you agitated or
Right.
mad, sad, you can't hide it. Especially from people that really know you.
And if you feel like you need to cry and you can't cry and become immune to it, maybe you end up anesthetizing yourself with drugs. So it's good to cry. It's absolutely good to cry. It's physiologically good to have that release, certainly. But in terms of Reverend Trivia's question, I think what happens with a lot of African American men, young men, is that there's an absence of a more mature male figure that sort of guides you from that prepubescence, that adolescent period to manhood. So because someone isn't guiding you through that process, you end up going from early adolescence directly to manhood because you don't have an opportunity to have the experience. And that's what we need to change. We need to change so that our young brothers can sort of go through those adolescent stages and have someone they can talk to and deal with sexuality, deal with sort of careers, and deciding on what's important to them, deal with sort of the values that you develop during the adolescent period. And conversations like this and the work that you do provides a lot of young brothers an opportunity for that. That makes a difference because then once you've done it and you're a parent, you know what to do with your child. Sort of want to break that cycle that we're in now.
It's unfortunate, but it's true that there are grown men that are 50, 60 years old with a 15, 16-year-old mentality. Right. Because they never went beyond that age. They stopped there because that was as far as they could go. And so people say, well, they're 50 years old, or they're 60 years old, they're a grown man. But they haven't never dealt with the issue. Right.
Well, sometimes the drug can mess you up and keep you like that. Whenever you want, you get high and you ain't coming back down.
That's very true.
Have there ever been a particular circumstance in your life where it appeared that you wanted to take your life away, that you wanted to end your life? And if so, what was that?
No, I haven't. I don't believe in suicide.
Okay.
No, I haven't really. I could say like I came across where my back was against the wall, where I just felt like, what is there? What else can I do? Like I felt like I didn't came to the point where like damn, I don't have nothing. What is like? Where do I go from here? Like I came across that. Like I never really was like, I like forget life itself.
It's gonna be hard, regardless. We can make it comfortable. It's gonna be hard.
I know I've definitely been depressed a couple of occasions, you know what I'm saying? But never to the point where it's like, I'm throwing the towel and I'm gonna get about this thing. Nah, but like, I mean, depression is a lot of the stuff that we already talked about, man. You seen stuff happening to your family, you seen your friends get knocked down, but that stuff hits you. Like, it's gonna be with you, and you're gonna feel some type of way about that. But my personal experience has never been, it's time for me to call quits and jump off a bridge or shoot myself or, you know what I'm saying, pop all these pills so I can be done. Nah.
It's good because the reality is that among African American young men, the suicide rate increased by 233% over the last 20 years. As compared to white men, the increase was 120%. So it's good to hear that you guys are not thinking about that, but it is an epidemic in this country right now, and something we definitely need to be doing something about for that rate to increase 233% within the young African American male population.
I kind of think, in my opinion, is like some of the things we do is kind of suicidal. We don't have to think like, oh, I wouldn't kill myself, but some of the things we do will kill yourself.
Precisely.
That's what I noticed. Like, a lot of people are not thinking like, in my life. But like, a lot of the actions that they're making are not pertaining to you keeping your life.
Precisely. That's very smart. That's a very wise
That's what I was
statement.
noticing.
That is a very wise statement. That feeling of hopelessness, that there's no reason to go on, is usually the trigger for those suicide thoughts. But you're right. Some of the behavior that we engage in is so reckless that you think that person must be suicidal.
There's so many young men full of potential, but empty.
Right.
Empty to the point that they don't even know their worth. They don't even know how smart they are. They don't even know the potential they have. And the expectancy, I'll just say in my life, I was told I wouldn't live to see 16. And I heard it so much that I began to believe the lie. And so I tried to do everything I could before I got 16, because I figured at 16 I'm not going to be here. And the crazy thing about that is, as I began to get 21 and 30 and 40, well, really actually 30 was when I realized it was a lie. But I really tried to kill myself, like you said. Not really literally try to kill myself, but I just tried to do everything I could, everything. Because anything after 16 is a bonus. Right. And then I started talking to other brothers, and they said the same thing. Right. And as you guys know, an OG now is even younger. 25 as an OG. Come on, man. If you live to see 25, you're OG. Because that's what I say, the expectancy. Yeah. You are not saying you per se, but the average brother is saying the expectancy is 25 years.
That's crazy.
That lifestyle gets you 25 years.
So if you don't die at 25, you go to jail at 25 because you're trying to survive. So
no, you're going to get 25.
Basically,
you're
like,
going to go to jail at 25, probably
basically
not.
Like 25 is the expectancy. Like, by the time you're 25, you're either going to be dead or in jail.
But if you're not, then what? You're going to keep staying in the streets?
well, that's the question.
Right.
Yeah.
That's that maturation process.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming on the show. We ran out of time. And so, we can, add to this show and have another show.
Yes.
But this is a conversation, man, that is wide open. You guys have my information. You can call me anytime. We can get you back on the show and talk about some other issues. Is that all right?
We still doing the man-to-man groups?
We're still doing the man-to-man every third Friday of the month at Allen Temple Baptist Church. It's 7 to 9. You ought to bring them. You've been there. So again, thank you for coming. Again, you've watched Can We Have a Conversation? We'll see you again next time. God bless you.